Put on your uniform, strap on your gun belt, get your baton, because we're headed to the police academy. Let's get into it. Obviously, what I'm talking about is 1984's Police Academy, that comedy classic. Well, maybe not. To some of us, it might be. To me, it kind of is. I have very fond memories of this movie. I haven't seen it in probably about 6, 7 years. I watched it again last night. If for all you people that have Netflix out there, they have all the police academies on there right now. So if you're a fan of the series, you can check them out on Netflix. I watched the first one last night, in my opinion, the best one, and the only R-rated one in the whole series. The rest of them were PG-13 after this, unfortunately, and it shows when you get into some of those later sequels. I like some of the sequels, but it started getting way out of hand by around the fourth one, and then the fifth one was god-awful, and the sixth one was even worse, and then I didn't see Mission to Moscow or any of those. But back in 84, I remember this when I was a kid. It was a staple on HBO. They used to play the shit out of this movie. And my dad recorded it on a VHS tape. Yes, kids, VHS tape. On a VHS recorder/player. And I used to watch this movie all the time. I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And I probably watched it way too young. So it was a little risky for me to be watching it. I don't know how old I was, but I know I was probably too young to be watching this movie because there's a lot of TNA in this movie. Watching again last night, there is a lot of TNA for sure, but there's some cursing, but the cursing's not that bad. It's more about the TNA, honestly, that puts it to the R rating. The language isn't that bad, honestly. There's a couple F-bombs in that, but it's not that bad. But anyway, this movie was made for a budget of $4.5 million. And the reason why we got this series that went on forever, because it made $81 million that year when it was released in March of 84. This movie was directed by Hugh Wilson. And as we all know, if you're a Guttenberg fan, it stars Steve Guttenberg as Mahoney. G.W. Bailey as Lieutenant Harris, the prick drill sergeant. Kim Cattrall as Thompson. Kim Cattrall was like the it girl in the 80s for movies. Between this, Mannequin, Big Trouble in Little China, etc., Porky's. I mean, she was the it girl for comedies, definitely. Bubba Smith is Hightower. Bubba Smith was an ex-football player. We have David Graff as Tackleberry, who is a classic character from this movie. Leslie Easterbrook as Sergeant Callahan. And Michael Winslow as Larvell Jones, who makes all the wacky noises. And actually, doing some research, he actually does all the announcements throughout the whole movie. It's actually him doing all the announcements and some of the special sounds throughout the movie. He's the one that does them all. And the cast is really good. The movie starts off with it's raining in the city. They never say what city they're in this office building. This is where we meet Tackleberry. He's the first character we meet. And he's a security guard at this office building. And you can tell when he's one of those guys that's really gung-ho about his job, where it's almost like he thinks he's a Navy SEAL or something. And he hears some noises in the break room, and he goes and he just fires his gun. And he turns the light on, and it's all his coworkers trying to throw him a surprise party because he's going to police academy. It's his last day working there. And then we're introduced to Mahoney, and he works at a car. He parks cars. And right away you can tell Mahoney's one of those guys who's like a party guy, really doesn't give a shit about much, and he jokes around a lot, doesn't take life that seriously. And this douchey guy comes up and tells him to park his car, and he's like, "Sir, the lot's full." And the guy starts berating him. And Mahoney, being Mahoney, can't let that pass, and he starts making fun of the guy's hair, saying, "Is that a wig?" He starts yelling, "Wiggler, Wiggler," and he's pointing at him, and his boss comes up, and he knows this guy who wants this car parked, and he basically tells Mahoney he's fired if he don't find a spot. And this is how Mahoney ends up at the police academy. He drives his car, gets it up on two wheels, and plows it right into the spot. He gets arrested, and we're introduced to this police officer who knows Mahoney, knew his dad, was good friends with his father, and tells him he's not going to save his ass this time. The only way out of it is for him to go to the police academy. And right before this, he meets Larvell Jones, played by Michael Winslow. And he says, "Well, I'll go, but is it all right if I take Larvell Jones? He's my personal physician, and I can't do this without him." He goes, "You can take whoever the hell you want." So they both go, and just like that, Larvell Jones ends up at the police academy with him. Just because they just had like a brief interaction out in the hallway, and right away these guys are best friends. And we meet some Tackleberry shows up. We meet Kim Cattrall, who's kind of like this rich girl who's doing something. It seems like she's doing it more just to piss her mom off. Bubba Smith, who we find out later was a florist who wanted to do some good. And if you remember Bubba Smith, he was a tall, built guy who actually, if they even say in the movie, if more cops looked like him, there would be no crime at all. We're introduced to Lieutenant Harris. And I don't know the actor's name who plays the guy who's in charge of the police academy. I know Captain Lassard, but there's a guy that's above him, and he's like, because the mayor of the city just made it where anybody can go to the police academy. It doesn't matter if you're overweight, if you can pass, it doesn't matter. They lowered the standard, so they have all these people, and he's like, look at these people. These aren't police officers, and they make a plan about how they're going to get a lot of these people to quit. And Lieutenant Harris is in on it because he's kind of a dick. And basically, after that, it's just hijinks at the police academy, honestly, where Mahoney's kind of trying to get kicked out at first, but then he kind of really likes Kim Cattrall's character, so he decides to stay. And they pull a bunch of goofy gags on Lieutenant Harris, and all this kind of crazy shit happens, and it's all fun. It really is. Watching it again for the first time in probably about 6-7 years, I had a lot of fun, and it reminds me of how good Steven Guttenberg was at just playing the everyman. And he did have a lot of screen presence, and he was very likable. I mean, I remember him from, obviously, the Police Academy movies. Cocoon Returns, and then he did 3 Men and a Baby, and the second one of that one, and he was in Diner, obviously, and he did some other things, but you forget how likable Steve Guttenberg. He was in Batteries Not Included, if I remember that correctly. No, he wasn't in Batteries Not Included. I made a mistake there, so scratch that one. But you forget how good he was in those roles. He's just a likable guy, even though he's kind of like this guy who doesn't take anything seriously. He's a very likable guy. Michael Winslow's very likable. David Graff's great as Tackleberry, the overzealous guy who takes everything seriously and can't wait to get into a gunfight. And pretty much the last part of the movie is that they all get taken to this riot zone in the city, which the way the riots get started is it's just hilarious. And it kind of turns into like a little bit of an action movie at the end, and they save the day, and they all become cops at the end. And there's some really good gags during the movie where they sneak this hooker in to give somebody Mahoney has her hide in the podium, and Captain Lassard comes in and gives a speech to this group that he's at, and she ends up giving him something while he's standing there at the podium. And when the thing's over, Captain Lassard goes to walk out, and he turns around, Mahoney pops out. And when Mahoney just goes, good speech, and climbs back in, because then Captain Lassard thinks Mahoney's the one that did it, but it was actually the hooker. It's a fun time. It's really well done. The actors are all great in their roles. You remember them in their roles. There's some really memorable scenes in this movie. The score is memorable. I like this movie a lot, and it's not going to be 6-7 years till I watch it again. It was fun rewatching it. Again, like I said, Steve Guttenberg, you forget how good he was in that film and in some of the other 80s movies he was in. You kind of miss Steve Guttenberg being around. I don't know what he's been in or if he's been in anything lately. But yeah, I would give Police Academy, I would give it an 8 out of 10. I really like it. It's not my favorite comedy of the 80s, but I like it. Watching it again, I enjoyed myself. I laughed out loud a bunch of times. I like the characters. Is it perfect? Hell no. But it's a good time. And if you've never seen it, I recommend checking out. Like I said, it's on Netflix. They have, I think, the whole series on there. I know they had 1, 2, 3, 4. I think the rest of them were on there as well. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's definitely a fun time. And that's it for me. I'll be back soon with another review. Have a great day.